Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings. Now let's get straight into it. So now we're going to continue in Revelation, the 20th chapter. In the first two parts, we went over verses 1, 2, and 3, I believe. And now we're going to go over verse 4. But before we talk about verse number 4 here in Revelation, the 20th chapter, I do want to go over verses 1, 2, and 3 again with some additional context because it is important for our people to understand our history and then be able to actually connect history, quote unquote, conventional history with the scriptures. So we understand that the Bible is a historical book. It's not just a book of fairy tales. It's actual real events that happened in history that we weren't taught about or we were lied to about, but actually took place, and the Bible prophesied about these events. And it all connects with our people, all right, and how things are going to go down in the end time. So let's go back into it. So this is Revelation chapter 20, verse 1. It says, "And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand." So we went over that in the first part, essentially just referring to the angels having the spiritual capacity to put any people into captivity. And the children of Esau, the Edomites, are the ones that will ascend from the bottomless pit and will put in the bottomless pit. A verse I didn't go over the first time that comes to mind is Job chapter 12 and verse 23, I believe, where it essentially says the Most High increaseth the nations and destroys them. Now let's get verse 2. "And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Okay. This is referring to what the scriptures call the middle time, where the so-called white man was not in rulership. Let's get that real quick. When I say the scriptures refer to the quote-unquote dark ages or the middle ages as the middle time. All right, let's get 2nd Esdras chapter 12. 2nd Esdras chapter 12. We could start at around verse 20. There's a lot of history in this chapter too. Eventually, I do want to go over this, but for now, let's just grab this. So verse 20, it says that in him there shall arise 8 kings, whose time shall be but small and their years swift. And 2 of them shall perish. The middle time approaching, 4 shall be kept until their end begin to approach, but 2 shall be kept until the end." So again, in the quote unquote Middle Ages where our people ruled, all right, during what is known as the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire, all right, our people ruled, meaning when I say our people, so-called black people rule Europe. Okay, and this is a secret that they definitely do not want to get out. And it's not just for us, it's for, and when I say them, I refer to the so-called white man. They do not want this secret out. And it's not just for us because, there's a great benefit for their own people to think that they've ruled since the Middle Ages too. And that's why it's very important to know your history. If you think you just came from nowhere, you're going to think you're nothing. Right. And that's what's wrong with our people now. We don't establish a history or a culture related to ourselves. So, we don't see value in ourselves. So it's very important to understand that our people are in rulership. Now we're going to go into this. We went into this the first time, this link here with history.com on the Byzantine Empire. And I want to circle back on a few things really quickly so we understand that, no, this is not, it's something that brothers like me is just making up. This is actual history that the Bible is dealing with. Now let's get it. All right, it says here, oh shoot, my bad, let's go. All right, it says, all right, now. Okay, it says the Byzantine Empire. Yeah. Stop doing that, man. All right, the Byzantine Empire was a vast and powerful civilization with origins that can be traced to AD 330 when the Roman Emperor Constantine I dedicated a quote unquote new Rome on the site of the ancient Greek colony of Byzantine. Okay, now again, we went over that the first time. I'm going to keep going here because this is the part I want to get. It says, though the western half of the Roman Empire crumbled and fell in AD 476 or AD 476, which is it's essentially like year 476. All right. The eastern half survived for 1,000 more years. This is what we get into verse 3 here. Or verse 2. Yeah, verse 2 as well. Okay. Spawning a rich tradition of art, literature, and learning, and serving as a military buffer between Europe and Asia. The Byzantine Empire finally fell in 1453 after an Ottoman army stormed Constantinople during the reign of Constantine the 11th. So the Ottoman Empire, we didn't talk about the Ottoman Empire that much in the first two installments, so I wanted to go back over this because it's important to understand who these Ottomans were, this Ottoman army that took over. This Ottoman army descended from the bottomless pit, which to me, which we went over the first time, and the first two installments is the Caucasus Mountains. But let's prove that a little bit more. Now, the Ottoman Empire. If you're saying to yourself, okay, I don't remember that much about the Ottoman Empire. I kind of remember hearing about the Ottoman Empire in school, but not really. That's normally an indication that there's something being hidden. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Okay, in this article here it says the Ottoman Empire. It says only 80 years separate the modern Middle East from the forgotten and long-lived Ottoman Empire. See, it says it's forgotten here too. Over 600 years, from about 1300 to 1923, the Ottoman Empire expanded into the largest political entity in Europe and Western Asia, and then imploded and disappeared into the back pages of history. All right, so that's not true, really. But what I'm saying here is that you have a civilization that was around for 600 years. All right, and it expanded this much, but you're not taught about them in school. Why is that? Again, that's normally an indication that something is being hidden. So not only do they hide so-called black history because they don't want our people to establish ourselves, as any type of rulers, all right, especially in Europe. Not only that, they'll hide their own empires too as well. The empires they're not as proud of because they don't want to link themselves back to anything of servitude back in Europe. So what I'm saying here is that these Ottoman Turks, these were some filthy Edomites that came through, ascended out of the bottomless pit, and essentially was a big part of the fall of our leadership or our rulership in Europe. Okay, these Ottoman Turks. I could keep going into this, but that's the main point that I wanted to get. Okay, matter of fact, I'll come back here because there's one more thing I want to touch on, but let's push forward for now. Let me show you about these dirty Edomites. Now, do you remember I believe in the first or second part of Revelation 20 where I showed y'all the wild man, okay, the wild man, and how I said that Esau had that excessive body hair. Well, let's go into something here. And I actually meant to go into this in the first installment. Now, this book here, I went over this book um, a few times now. This is the 13th tribe by Arthur Koestler. So the 13th tribe by Arthur Koestler is essentially this so-called Jewish man that is saying that his people could not be the ancient Israelites of the Bible. They could not be. They would have to be a 13th tribe because they dang sure is not the 12 tribes. Okay? And he says here, what happens to anti-Semitism if Jews are not really Semites at all? Well, that's not particularly true, but what he's saying is that they're not Israelites. Okay, so that's, another thing going on right now in the media is Jamie Foxx. He said something about if they killed Jesus or they betrayed Jesus, what more of betraying him or something along those lines. And now he had to come out and make an apology, and Jennifer Aniston and all this little different stuff going on where, again, the so-called Jewish man is showing you that, you can talk about everybody else, but you can't talk about him. Okay. And that was such a reach. Like, how do you say something like that if they killed Jesus, quote unquote, Jesus, or betrayed Jesus? They'll betray me. How is that linking back to the so-called Jewish man? They really just playing everybody, essentially. But anyways, it says here, the book by the world famous author Arthur Koestler represents the culmination of the most astounding feat of historical detective work of our time. In bold, brilliant, enthralling fashion, it proves that the true ancestors of the Western Jewry, or the so-called Jewish people, were not Semites. That's not necessarily true. But rather the warrior empire of the Khazars, a mighty power that converted to Judaism in the Dark Ages. That's what we talking about here, the 1,000 years. That's the Dark Ages, which they call it the Dark Ages because so-called black people ruled in Europe at this time. All right, from the late 5th century all the way really into the 19th century, but our rulership started to decline around the 15th century, so 1,000 years. Okay, anyways, a mighty power that converted to Judaism in the Dark Ages and whose subsequent exodus gave birth to the mainstream of the Jewish people as they now exist. Okay, now let's go back to the Turks. I want to just establish that. But as you see, here are the Khazars. Those are the actual quote unquote Jewish people of today. And as always, you can see the Caucasus Mountains here in Georgia between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So an Edomite himself is attesting that his people came from this area. Oh, and you see the Guz right there? We're gonna talk about that too. All right. And let me go to the page here. Now, let's start here. Okay, and this is in reference to the Ottoman Turks that we saw was able to dethrone Constantinople. Okay, that was a part of the end of the Byzantine Empire. All right, the Ottoman Turks, or this Ottoman army in 1453, excuse me. But let's see some characteristics of these people. Okay, it says accustomed to the splendid baths of Baghdad, our traveler could not get over the dirtiness of the Turks. The Guz did not wash themselves. The Guz being the Turks, okay, one of the tribes of the Turks, did not wash themselves after defecating, so, taking a dump, or urinating, nor do they bathe after seminal pollution or on other occasions. So no matter what, these people did not take baths. Okay, what did that sound like? a filthy Edomite, right? Okay, they refused to have anything to do with water, particularly in winter. Ugh. When the Guz commander in chief took off his luxurious coat of brocade to don a new coat the mission had brought him, they saw that his underclothes were fraying apart from dirt. For it is their custom never to take off the garment they wear close to their bodies until it disintegrates. Wow, imagine that. You wear a shirt so long that it just disintegrates because you don't want to take it off. All right, like a cartoon character. That's the Turkish people, man, the Turkish tribe. Another Turkish tribe, the Bashkirs, shave their heads and eat their lice. They search the folds of their undergarments and crack the lice with their teeth. Okay, so when we went over that, the so-called white man had body hair all over himself. This was not just a theory, or this was not just something that me and other brothers are just making up. It's here in history. Okay, so these Ottoman Turks were filthy, and this was part of the reason that, again, the 1,000 years ended in rulership in Europe. And also, which is important to understand, you see that they had body lice. They were eating their own lice. You know what that gave birth to? Another thing that crumbled our rulership in Europe, which is the Black Death. Okay, the Black Death, or the Black Plague. That's something that they taught us about in school, the Black Plague. Now let's see. Let's link this all together, because it all goes hand in hand. The quote unquote Ottoman Turks, the excessive body hair, the wild man, Esau. Okay, it all comes in together when you know exactly what's going on here. It says new studies suggest human fleas and lice were behind Black Death, not rodents. A team of researchers within the University of Oslo has found evidence that suggests human fleas and lice. Who had human fleas and lice? These dirty Edomites that were living in the mountains, not rodents, were behind the spread of the plague that killed millions of people over the course of several centuries. In their paper published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the group reports using mathematical models from mortality records to demonstrate how the plague would have spread under different scenarios of what they found by doing so. Most adults today remember reading in school about the Black Death. And again, they called it the Black Death because it was killing mainly so-called black people. Okay, it wasn't killing the so-called white man as much because they were the ones causing it. They were the ones that had the lights and everything. They were spreading it. When they came out and emerged from the Caucasus Mountains, or over there in Russia, okay, they brought with them different diseases that was really crippling our people when they came out this area here. So you remember the Guz, that's one of the tribes of the Ottoman Turks that were so filthy they didn't take baths no matter what. They came out of here and pushed over here to the Byzantine Empire and over to the West more and start spreading diseases, okay, through human fleas and lice. Okay, so this is actual history here. This is how the 1,000 years ended for our people. And by the way, just to let y'all know, when I say rulership in Europe, okay, it's not that our people were being righteous in this rulership, because they weren't. And that goes into another question that brothers normally have is, are these 1,000 years with Christ that we read about in verse 4, is that the same 1,000-year time period where we ruled when we ruled in Europe? Is that the same 1,000 years? And no, it's not, because we definitely were not a righteous people at that time. Okay, but anyways, let's go back here. Most adults today remember reading in school about the Black Death, which killed approximately 25 million people. Wow. I mean, put that in context to COVID-19. Like, that would have been a real plague. That would have been like if people, of any age, especially like in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, were dying from COVID-19, and you had like approximately 25 million people that were dying. That would be a plague that, that would be considered an actual plague, unlike COVID-19, which we know mainly affected the elderly. All right, when I say elderly, like 70 plus, and also had an extremely high recovery rate if you were to get the COVID-19 virus. And I had it. I got it at one time. It was, I believe it was in the latter part of 2020, or was it in 2021? Either way, I had it, and I could see where if your immune system was compromised, where it could have it could have an effect on you. But dang sure, I've been sicker before in my life. It wasn't that deep. But anyways, this is an actual plague, or this Black Death that was going around killing all our people in Europe. But anyways, it says which killed approximately 25 million people back in the 1300s. Now you see, that's exactly when the Ottoman Turks start rising in power. And most also being taught that rodents, mostly rats, spread it around. The plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which is able to move between victims through various vectors. And until recently, it's believed that fleas that lived on rats jumped from their hosts that died from the plague into humans, infecting them. But in recent years, that theory has begun to lose credibility because it could not account for how quickly the plague spread, or why there were no reports of mass deaths of rats from the same disease. In this new effort, the researchers looked at the alternative theory that suggests fleas and lice that lived on humans were behind the spread of the disease. Okay, and we saw the Edomites, the Ottoman Turks, okay, they had excessive body hair, okay, which brought forth lice. Like, how could you have lice on you if you shave it down? Where is this lice and these fleas even going to be host to that? Okay, it was on the Edomites that came out, okay, out of the bottomless pit. All right, you got to deal with this. This is actual history. Okay, so not anything I want to be true or anything like that. It's just, it is what it is. Okay, the team started by amassing data from mortality records regarding the spread of several outbreaks that occurred in Europe between the 14th and 19th centuries, one of which was the Black Death. We just saw the 14th and the 19th centuries correspond exactly with the Ottoman Turks. This is the 14th and the 19th century. Okay? So, and this is exactly when the so-called blacks, their rulership started to crumble in Europe. Okay? The Black Death was a big part of it. All right, so when it says here in Revelation where and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, is referring to Esau, all right, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Because before that time, before starting in the 1300s, they were bound for 1,000 years, okay? And cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. We're in that little season now. Okay? But that's more information on the Ottoman Turks, okay, and how they spread the Black Death. All right. Well, they created the Black Death through the excessive lice, or well, they had excessive hair, which they were filthy. As you see, they didn't want to take baths. And this is according to another Edomite, all right, which gave way to the Black Death, all right. And so-called black people, they didn't have the antibodies to deal with, this plague, and that's why it was taking most of us out. Therefore, why they call it the Black Death. Okay, they are telling you exactly who it was killing, or who it mainly affected just by in its name. Why call it the Black Death? Don't believe none of the nonsense they tell you why they named it the Black Death. It's because it was taking our people out. Okay? Finish this off really quickly. They then created a mathematical model that could be used to demonstrate how each of the outbreaks spread. They ran a model under 3 different scenarios in which the outbreak was due to rats, airborne transmission, or to human fleas and lice. The researchers found that the scenario in which the outbreak was linked to human fleas and lice offered the best match to what actually occurred. Yeah, so if it was due to rats, they teach us in school, they teach us in school or taught us in school that it was due to rats. Just like they try to blame COVID-19 on bats. But, just like this wasn't the case, it wasn't due to rats, and COVID-19 wasn't due to just, a bat outbreak. Same thing. They always want to lie about where these things come from. Neither of the vectors they found could cause the disease to spread as quickly as it did. Yeah, if it was by rats, why were there not, millions and millions of rats corpses, just all around the place in Europe? There was no reports of that like we read earlier. Neither of the other vectors they found could cause the disease to spread as quickly as it did. They also note that human fleas and lice were very common. Hold up. They also note that human fleas and lice were very common in people during the period under study due to infrequent bathing. That's exactly what we just read here about the Ottoman Turks. You see? They refuse to do anything with water, particularly in winter. Okay? The dirtiness of the Turks. They did not wash themselves. Infrequent bathing. All right? Wearing undergarments and crack their lice with their teeth. They used to eat their own lice. This don't sound like somebody that could spread a disease that would kill millions of people. That's how nasty they were. Okay, they did not bathe for Lord knows how long, maybe years on end. Who knows? If you wear a shirt so long that it disintegrates, how long will you have to wear a shirt before it just disintegrates on you, man? Those were the Ottoman Turks. All right, the Edomites. Do not be fooled by how they look today. This is their real history. This is where they really come from. Okay? It is what it is. And that's why they go so hard today, because they don't want you to understand this. They do not want you to understand that they come from filth. All right? And y'all be getting pressed over cavemen. I don't understand it. But anyways, let's read verse 3 one more time here. Well, let's start from the top. It says, Revelation chapter 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. and after that he must be loosed a little season. So this is referring to before Esau came out of the bottomless pit and began to start their rulership again, which they're in rulership right now. They were sealed before that time. Okay. So from the time of around 476 AD all the way up until around 1453 AD. Okay. So that's when they came out. That's the 1,000 years. This is not the same 1,000 years, by the way, mentioned in verse 4. Okay. Let's read that really quickly. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. This is not the same 1,000-year period. Okay, because you see, I saw thrones and they sat upon them. This is referring to after Yahushua comes back and he places his 12 disciples as the 12 judges over the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. Verse 5 and 6, let's read that really quickly just to establish that, because a brother did comment about that last time, and we're going to get into that too. Verse 5, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Okay. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of the Most High and of Hamashiach or Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So this is after Yahushua's return. Okay, and the elect are made whole, and you have the 1,000 year, the first rulership before the final atonement, the final judgment, okay, or the second death. You got the first death when Yahushua comes back, and then you got the second death, which is going to be the destruction of the wicked. Okay, so that's the 1,000 years. And one thing, and we're going to get into this, so I'm going to go back over this, but just really quickly, when it says and reign with Christ 1,000 years, again, this is not saying that the kingdom is only going to last 1,000 years and that's it. It's just referring to the time period before, or ending off with the last judgment before the second death. And when it says reign with Christ, when Yahushua comes back, the kingdom is not just going to be made right then and there. It's not going to be total subjection from the nations and everything just as soon as Yahushua comes back. And he told us that many times, that the kingdom is not just, do not look for the kingdom. Matter of fact, you want to grab this really quickly. So Luke chapter 17 and verse 20, it says, and when he was demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of the Most High should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of the Most High cometh not with observation. Neither shall they say, lo here, or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of the Most High is within you. So the kingdom is not just going to come immediately after Yahushua returns. Okay, there's going to be that 1,000 years of establishing the kingdom here on earth. That's what it's referring to here. All right, it's not, everything is not just going to go back to normal. There's so much wickedness on this earth. Okay, breaking down all of the idols, establishing Yahushua's rule, subjecting the nations and putting them into captivity. It's not just all going to happen in one day. Okay, it's going to take time. So that's what this is referring to. But we'll get back there. I want to establish verse 4 first. talking about the great persecution. But yeah, before we go into verse 4, let me establish some more context here in verses 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Esau and who he was during this 1,000 years, or really we talk more about how Esau came in out of the bottomless pit. Now let's talk about so-called black rulership in Europe. Again, it's so much. It's really hard to, without doing its own separate lesson, it's really hard to cover anything in detail, because I find myself wanting to go over certain aspects of our rulership in Europe, but then it just leads me down another rabbit hole. And I do want to stay on the topic of this chapter, so it's definitely going to have to be a separate lesson. But I did want to go over this really quickly. It's something that I brought out on one of the lessons on who is Esau. One of those lessons, I think we did 3 parts, but I brought this out on here, and this would just bring a little bit more context to so-called black rulership in Europe. Okay, now this is Ben Franklin's words here. Okay, this is a letter that he wrote. It says Ben Franklin on German immigrants to the colonies. So this is Benjamin Franklin, okay, one of the quote unquote founding fathers of the United States. All right, now let's see what he said about the people in Europe. Okay, let's get it. We just gonna go straight into it, since I just wanted to cover this really quickly. Let's just go straight into it. It says here, which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. It's very true. That's why you should not call yourself a minority, because actually most people, and this still remains true, most people on planet Earth are actually quote unquote people of color. Okay. It says all Africa is black or tawny. Asia, chiefly tawny. What does the word tawny mean? Tawny just means black, essentially. Okay, or someone of color. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. So wait a second. What Benjamin Franklin is saying here is that, and this was written around 1775, I want to say. Yeah, a 1755 essay titled Observations Concerning the Increasing of Mankind, Peopling of Countries. So this is when he wrote this. So in 1755, Benjamin Franklin was saying America was chiefly tawny, okay, or chiefly black, so-called black. Okay, that's most of the people that were in America. All right. Not these fake Indians, okay? But that's another story. Anyways, and in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, Swedes, and generally of what we call a swarthy complexion. And are the Germans also, the Saxons only excepted, who with the English make the principle of the body of white people on the face of the earth. I could wish their numbers were increased. So Benjamin Franklin was basically saying, I wish there was more so-called white people in Europe. Okay. Now, let's keep going. It says, and while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America? Where again, this is one of the so-called founding fathers of America. All right. And if you think that this place was founded on quote unquote equal rights or anything like that, you're just in complete delusion, because these people were not they were not for so-called black people, the quote unquote founding fathers. All right. Anyways, it says, because what I'm saying is he obviously was racist. But anyways, okay, let's keep reading. Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity, by excluding all blacks and tawnies, of increasing the lovely white and red? But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is neutral to mankind. Okay, so remember, Esau was labeled as the great red dragon in Revelation, the 12th chapter. Okay, so he's talking about the Edomites. But remember, the word swarthy was used here. Let's go back. The word swarthy was used for the Europeans at that time. They were generally what we call a swarthy complexion. The Russians, the French, the Italians, the Spaniards, okay, the Swedes. What does the word swarthy mean? Dark colored, especially of skin. 1580s, unexplained alteration of swarthy. Okay. And the same word goes for tawny. So if we look that up here too, looked in tawny, tan colored, late 14th century, Anglo-French tan, or like the brownish yellow of tan leather, a French tannet, dark brown, tan, okay, which just means so-called black. All right, that's why Ben Frank was bringing that out, because he was saying in Europe at this time, and this is in the 1700s, so this is when so-called black rulership was, getting close to the end. So just imagine if we in year, 780 AD or whatever the case, 800 AD, mostly so-called black people were in Europe, okay? And the so-called white people at that time were in subjection. They were what you call serfs or Slavs, okay? The Slavic people, that's where they were, man. It is what it is. So anyways, I believe that we pretty much cover that. But yes, serfs. Oh, also, by the way, serfs is Latin for slaves. Okay, and that's where so-called white people were at this time. They were in subjection during the Dark Ages. All right, and really think about it like this too. If how they were, how it's taught in conventional history, if so-called black people were the ones that were slaves in the Dark Ages, you would not hear the end of it. All right, they would talk about that in school and everything too. They would teach you that, and that's why they bring up slavery so much. When I say slavery, in this case, the transatlantic slave trade and the slavery of our people, is because they want you to constantly think as yourself as a slave. But if throughout these 1,000 years in Europe, or just throughout the whole history of our people's rulership in Europe, if we were actual slaves, we would know details on it. You would not hear the end of it. I promise you that. And that's really another clue to let you know that so-called whites were in bondage for these 1,000 years. It was not our people for the most part. Okay. But now we can go to verse 4. Okay, I think that's all I had on that. Nope, I got a little bit more. Got a little bit more. Let's go to these rare Russian icons on display in Moscow. So I wanted to show you guys these Russian icons, because a lot of the thumbnails that we've made on the lessons on this channel were from Russian icons. And I'm pretty sure brothers know that. But I wanted to show this so brothers can also see that this is still here in Europe. So when I say that we were in rulership in Europe, I'm not just making it up. This actual factual history. Okay, let's get out of that.
Icons dating back to the 14th century brought together from private collections across Russia.
So this is in Russia.
It gives you goose pimples. It's a remarkable exhibition.
See, these are so-called black icons where these icons were painted based on how the people looked at this time. You see, that's quote unquote image of Christ. You see, they so-called black, and this guy is saying that it was blackened over time. That makes no sense. How could only their faces be quote unquote blackened over time? It makes absolutely no sense at all.
Centuries by the passage of time, viewed as religious objects, often left blackened over the centuries by the passage of time and added layers of paint.
When we learned how to remove the dark layers, we discovered underneath an overwhelming beauty, to such an extent that it shocked Andre Matisse, who
You see? So this is what the people look like,
was in Moscow
even
at the
in
time.
Russia.
He said, "It's here that artists should come to learn to paint, not to Italy."
But today, only a small number of these masterpieces remain.
And that's Black Madonna right there. That's the Black Madonna.
Most were destroyed during the Soviet era.
These icons are the survivors. If museums hadn't saved them, they wouldn't exist today. There are 50,000 icons in Russian museums. Before, there were millions.
But now the future of this part of Russian heritage is up for debate. Are the icons best held by museums, or should they
See that?
be returned to the country's churches?
So all the images of the many biblical figures, as you see there, were the so-called black people. Okay. All right, that's a Black Madonna. That was used as a thumbnail on one of our lessons there. But anyways. All right, last thing I pulled up here. Let's see. It says racist image in Coburg divides small German town. Tensions are running high in a debate over the coat of arms in the northern Bavarian town of Coburg. Two women in Fairway, Berlin have launched a campaign saying it is a racist image with no place in today's world. Okay, so you see this? This is still over here in Coburg, the Coburg Moor. Okay. It says here, in a sunny day in Coburg's central market square is a study in harmony and order. The long sides of the square boasts the prettily restored facades of townhouses. One of the shorter ends features the town hall with a stately facade. All right, so let's go to the point. It says critics are arguing that the crest includes a racist depiction. St. Maurice, also known as the Coburg Moor, Coburg again being a town in Germany, is a black man with attributes clearly viewed by the creator as stereotypical for the people of Black Africa. Thick lips, a slight underbite, and frizzy hair, as well as a large Creole earring. The image can be seen throughout the town, featured on facades, signs, and every couple of meters on the top of manhole covers. So you see, this is still over there in Germany right now. The Coburg Moor, St. Maurice, this is in Germany right now. Coburg Moor is featured even on manhole covers all over town. So keep in mind, now you do not put just slaves on manhole covers like this. You don't make statues of slaves. You don't This omnipresent Moor's head adorns the gate of Coburg's town hall. You don't put slaves on gates of town halls. Why would you give a slave that type of dignity? Okay. Or a statue like this? It's because our people were in rulership, and it's so much history. And it's so much, because for 1,000 years, there's no way you could destroy all of that. They tried. When I say that, they, the so-called white man, they did try, for sure. With the Enlightenment period and painting over, a bunch of images, destroying and storing a lot of our history, but they couldn't do all of it. It's way too much. It was way too long of a rulership for them to be able to do so. Okay. So again, this is over there in Germany right now, and not just in Germany, all over Europe. You have different crests, statues, and things of that nature that are still there, just like we were seeing over there in Russia with the icons. All right, that still shows images of our people, of so-called black people. Okay. And which I haven't even touched on yet, the point of this article, this silly woman here, Alicia Archie, which it ain't no telling who she really is. She got the blonde hair. Ain't no telling who she really is, but she's trying to make it seem like this is quote unquote racist. It's just history. I mean, how is that racist? It's not like a so-called white man or men created this in the likeness of being racist. Well, let me just make a manhole cover and put a Negro on it. Let's just do this afterwards. It was already there before so-called white people were the main inhabitants of Germany. Okay. Honor and reverence are also terms used by cultural scientist Hubert Habel. He wrote his doctorate on urban symbols and cultural history in Coburg. What did he say here? He had also dug deeply into the background of the quote-unquote Moor and is convinced that the figure symbolizes Saint Maurice, a black African. They want to associate this with Africa, but he was really from there. Christian legionary who was executed for his commitment to his faith. This is why Habel believes that the quote-unquote Moor in Coburg's crest is absolutely inoffensive because of the esteem and high regard that expresses for the saint. Okay, and another thing they'll do is try to make it seem like this is just one off, like he was a black African, he came from Africa, and Saint Maurice did. No. But anyways, that was some of the things I wanted to pull up here. Now we're gonna move on and talk about verse 4, and we'll do that in the second part. Just wanted to go over some of the so-called black history. Some of the more damning evidence, really, to show that our people were already there, and to show how it relates to today. Also wanted to show that Esau in conventional history, you could see where the Ottoman Turks were filthy people, and they're the ones that caused the Black Death, quote unquote Black Death, or the bubonic plague, as is sometimes mentioned too, or named too, in Europe, which led to the demise of our people in Europe, okay, which is this first 1,000 years mentioned in Revelation chapter 20. But we'll continue in the next part, and Lord willing, this was edifying. But until the next time, bid you a mighty shalom.